gumshoes. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I will, since I'm back on my laptop, I will wait to confirm sound. So if someone could let me know if you hear me, then we will jump in. Excuse me. I saw someone said, am I in the wrong room again? Yeah, I don't know what happened with that last one. Yes, you hear. Okay, great. Then let's go ahead and jump in. I shared my screen, but now it's, I guess I have to do it again. I've never had to share my screen twice, but let's try it again. Okay. All right, so this is going to be a short live. It was enough that I was like, I don't want to just like squeeze it in, like in the midst of, you know, a trial day. I want to, excuse me, kind of like preserve those lives to discuss the actual trial. But it was a little too much to just like address in a single video. So I decided to just do a quick live. As always, if you are inclined to send a message to Phoenix Police, not that they care, that my brother Joe's death should also be investigated, you can go to bit.ly/justice for Joe. Okay, so I want to start off, excuse me, with a clip from Adam's testimony when Lori was questioning him. We're also going to look at a clip from when Trina was questioning him, but I want to start with kind of setting the frame for when they last spoke. Oh, wait a minute. I just realized I'm wearing headphones. Well, if someone could let me know if you can hear the audio. I've never done this with headphones, so we'll see. So someone just, my mods just told me that the sound doesn't come through the headphones. The way I've gotten around the sound before when I'm at home is I use a microphone. StreamYard doesn't seem to have the ability to do both. So I just won't play the videos. I'll just address it, and then I'll I'll share the videos after the live. So and now they really need to get this technology. Okay, so when Lori was asking Adam about when they last saw each other and spoke to each other, Adam stonewalled. Like, he did not want to say, excuse me, when they last saw each other or when they last spoke. Now, I think his own documentary. Well, let me put this in full screen. I think his own documentary or whatever that was. It was a special episode of Adam and Evil. I think that kind of forced his hand, because when you do these shows, they're always looking for exclusive photos, and they had this photo that the family had done together, and it is very clearly in the Queen Creek home. Just one second. Okay, so this is where they were standing. This is a picture that's online that anyone can confirm. This was the house that I visited. Also, they were only in the Queen Creek house from December 2017. I think it was like the end of December to December 2018. So it's not like this was a house that they lived in, for years and years, and this could have been taken at any time. There was only that one very short period of time. We know that they moved to Gilbert from Charles' body cam, the video of Charles on body cam from January 2019. He said that they had just moved in the first of the year. Aside, this pic was really sweet. This was from that same visit. Okay, so then when Adam was talking to Trina, and obviously the prosecutor was the one questioning him first. I just wanted to kind of set the stage of the fact that something that should have been a really easy question to answer, he was stonewalling. And anyway, but when Trina questioned him, he said that their breakdown was over him confronting her about her claim that she was a translated being. So again, I'm trying to kind of figure out this timeline, because if the last time he ever even spoke to her was sometime early 2018, he said it wasn't at Colby's wedding. That was in January. So we know that it was sometime early 2018, but after Colby's wedding. But so he said it was over, he just said, basically that's not rooted, that belief isn't rooted in reality, and she stopped talking to him. Mm-hmm. So I want to step back a little bit for people who might be kind of newer to the case, because we pick up a lot of people when there's actually a trial. And when Melanie Gibb, who had been a close friend of Lori Vallow and was in this whole group, they called themselves the Seven Gatherers. Those were the women who were closest to Lori. She was being interviewed by one of the police departments. She did quite a few interviews. she addressed this issue of how someone becomes translated. So she stated that Chad would use the pendulum to check vibrations. If you were able to reach a score of 1,000, you were translated. So being a translated being, it wasn't tethered to his trust scores. That was something else. It wasn't tethered to his death percentages. That was another score he kept. This had to do with your vibrations. And when you reached a level of 1,000, you were considered a translated being. So, uh, as your vibrations increased from 1,000, you could portal at some point. Melanie was told that the more you went to the temple, the more your vibrations increased. Chad and Lori would provide them with little bits of information at a time. She described it as a rope getting tighter and tighter. She added that the reference to zombies did not come until later. Okay, so one key point here is that only Chad could identify translated beings according to their beliefs. And we've heard that from other witnesses. We've heard about the pendulum that first kind of came to light, I think, in about mid 2020, that he had like this pendulum that looked like a pendant on a necklace almost, and it would swing back and forth, and that's how he assessed a person's vibrations. We know that there was an interaction with Zulema where she was very excited that her Chad had told her that her vibrations had increased, and then she was able to portal. And so this was their belief system. The problem is that Lori and Chad didn't meet until October 26, 2018. So that is outside this span of early 2018. So when I was listening to Adam's testimony, and again, like I said before, I think that Adam's testimony came across as credible. Even this resistance here, I personally, I don't think it really hurt his credibility as much as, like, when I put myself in the shoes of the jurors, I I think I would have felt empathy for him. I might have had some concerns about, like, why aren't you just answering the question? But I just don't think it would have hurt his credibility that much. Maybe, but I don't think so, because I think they would have been inclined to be very empathetic toward him, having to answer questions from his sister when he was, as far as the jury knows, he was friends with Charles. But again, but in my mind, so I'm taking myself out of the jurors. I think his testimony will be helpful to the state. He did come out and say that he did believe that that his sister conspired to murder Charles, although on cross, when she asked him, point blank, did you ever witness me conspire to kill Charles? He said no. So he was sharing his opinion, which that gets into, that's a separate issue. The only witnesses who are allowed to share opinions, as far as I know, are expert witnesses, but Lori didn't object. So it's on the record. But this much bigger issue is, how is it that, like, she wouldn't have known she was a translated being until the end of October? And so how could he have, had as his last conversation with her a confrontation, letting her know, listen, you're not a translated being. This isn't rooted in reality, when he kind of stuck the pin in early 2018. So my thoughts and questions, why would Adam stonewall over this question? Again, it should have been a very easy question to answer. Was he afraid of where where Lori's questioning should have was going to go? I don't know. But my bigger question is, what might have happened in early 2018 that might have brought the family together? I mean, one thing is we know from Adam that he said that Zach moved into Lori and Charles' place after Colby moved out. So that happened sometime in 2018. And somewhat early, because when I was there in May 2018, Lori had told me that Colby and Kelsey had just moved out. So, I don't know. I don't know the exact timing. When I was there, Zach lived there, Colby and Kelsey had moved out, and I was there in May. But that wouldn't have been, something to stonewall over. Like, okay, I was out there to help my son, move into, Charles and Lori's house. What else? Could there have been something else that happened in early 2018 that Adam might not have wanted to talk about? This is where my mind went. The only other significant thing that happened that we know of in early 2018 was Joe died. He was found April 3rd, but the estimate was that he had been dead for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. Dr. Amy Salerno, who's been interviewed multiple times on one podcast, I can't think of the name of it. I was on the podcast early on. It's a really good podcast, but she's been interviewed several times, and she stated that, having read the ME's report, that because of I won't go into detail, but the state of his skin, she said that she believes Joe would have been in an advanced state of decomposition. So probably further from the 1 week mark, probably closer to the 2 to 3 week mark. So, and we also know that, if the family had gathered after Joe was found, or, we know from a friend in Hawaii that Lori, or multiple friends in Hawaii, that Lori had flown out there after Joe was found. So I don't know when, because no one told us, when were these pictures taken? I think that Adam knows. I think he knows exactly when he was there. But but if it was after Joe was found, and I don't want to be prejudicial, although I'm not a prosecutor, I don't, I'm not bound into the U.S. Constitution here. But the pattern would fit with the Cox family circling the wagons, because we saw that in the police report because of an interaction between Lori and Melanie Gibb. So it said Lori received a text from, was Melanie Gibb. The name associated with this number, according to Lori's contact list, was Phoebe. This same number on the Lori for Sale account was listed for Melanie Gibb. So this was Melanie texting, "Are you home? I want to come over." Now, this was about 36 hours roughly before Charles was shot. Lori responded stating, "All my family and the kids are here, so it's chaos right now." Now, at the same time, Lori had, supposedly just found out about this whole intervention, and that's a whole nother question. But anyway, let me just finish reading. Gibb responded, "Okay, let me know when." And then as the story goes, Melanie just actually drove over there and was like, I'm outside your house. And then Lori told her, okay, you can come in if you're quiet. But we know from the timeline that there were many texts exchange between Lori and Chad, Lori and Alex, and or no, Lori and Chad, and Lori and Melanie then Boudreaux. She wasn't at the house at this time because Lori was texting her, telling her, excuse me, you can't go to this wedding in Utah that she wanted to go to. Anyway, so this was just the question that kind of ran through my head, because of course, when I heard this and I saw that Adam was stonewalling over when he actually last saw her, when he last spoke to her. I obviously know that Joe died in early 2018, and it could also offer explanation as to why Adam might have been so concerned about about this line of questioning. So yeah, that's it. We may never know, but yeah, I don't even know that. I was thinking about this last night. I don't even know that Lori would be gearing up for an appeal. I assume they will appeal, but when I was thinking about it last night, it was like, on the one hand, on the other hand, well, on the one hand, if she appeals, we know that she's already complained about the conditions in the jail. She said that the jail is, she told Brianna, the conditions in the jail are, quote, 1,000,000 times worse than prison. So if they did appeal, then that will bring her back to Arizona, and so, but I do suspect that they will probably have grounds for appeal. We'll see. But yeah, anyway, yeah. So that's just kind of how the gerbils are running in the cage at the moment. It was just a curiosity for me. Like, well, it's more than a curiosity. It was like, okay, what is going on? These should really be very easy questions and to answer. And so I'm always more curious about the why. Like, why like when people have been deceptive. I'm not saying he's being deceptive. I'm saying, like, when people have been deceptive, why? Like, what is it that they're afraid of? Is it something they feel ashamed about? Is it something that they're afraid of coming to light? There are any number of explanations, but also we know, and I thought about playing it again and I deleted the slide, but we know from Detective Moffat's conversation with Bobby that he had warned Bobby and Kate that he didn't think that Adam was trustworthy, and he told Bobby that that Adam may have called Lori after talking to Charles. And that's a really big question mark, and that may also help explain why Adam really doesn't want to talk about any cutoff points, like, because like his memories would be pretty strong, but as far as like when like something precipitated the family getting together, And it wasn't Colby's wedding, even though Zach was the best man in Colby's wedding. And that's fine. I mean, families are drama. There could be any number of reasons why Adam wasn't at the wedding, but so I'm not as concerned about that. It's just more the, you know, um, why did he seem, just so steely, and even like no idea. And in response to one of her questions, he was like, nope. But then she was also just getting so weird about like the enchiladas. Like, she didn't do herself any favors with that. That was just bizarre. But anyway, if you have any questions about this topic, please just put the word question in all caps, and the mods will pass them on to me. Yes. Okay. Just looking at multiple places to see if there are any questions. If there aren't any questions, I will call it a night. Oh yeah. I don't think Adam said he was working that day. I think, oh, maybe he did. I don't know. But in the timeline that that came from a combination of Adam and Zach, I think Zach said he worked. I think it was like the next day. And like they went and played basketball, and it was just kind of like life as usual. Sugar Gold, no. They're not going after either Melanie. And I don't think that they will. I don't mean to dash anyone's hope that like maybe after these trials they'll go after Melanie Gibb and Melanie Pulaski. I just think that these investigations were so subpar. I suspect Maricopa County's prosecutor's office is they're just going to want to get this dumpster fire, out from under them as fast as possible. Okay. Susan asked, why wouldn't Lori say that she spoke to Adam if they spoke? I don't understand why they would both keep it quiet. Well, yeah, Susan, I have the same question. Like, I've noticed so far in the trial, Lori hasn't brought any evidence. Like, she hasn't refuted any of the witnesses' claims with like text messages, phone call records, just anything like that. And we don't know how much of that she would even have access to, because as far as I know, they didn't extract data from Adam's phone, but they did from hers. So she would have been able to, pull up, especially since she would remember, but I did address, one of the days this week, just a curiosity of like, because over if there may have been pressure from the family on Lori to not go after family members, because I do think that Lori could unearth some of these skeletons. But and I had shared, I think this was Thursday, that I knew from a confidential source that, or a confidential source had said that the only one who was from the family who was in contact with Lori at that particular time was her mom, and that she was filling her commissary. So, you know, so that could, possibly be a restraint, even if it was just internal. Like, who knows? I mean, there are really just so many questions, and this is a mysterious family. Like, nothing is simple, nothing is straightforward. They make they make claims, they contradict their own claims. Their claims are contradicted by the police report. I mean, it's just it, it's kind of baffling. So, for some of these things, I hope that more questions will be answered through, more releases of the FOIA docs, because we still haven't gotten the FOIA docs from Idaho. And then there's going to be another round of FOIA docs after these trials. I suspect they'll all probably be, start to come out after the trial for Brandon Boudreaux. But yeah, I suspect, because some of these family members who, have made statements that are questionable, dubious, maybe, that I would imagine the state is going to be very inclined to redact those statements, because they are their witnesses. So we just may not know. But sometimes things are revealed that you just, like, you can just put two and two together. Like the time I came across the legend, and it had all of these initials, and then one set of initials was SS, and that person was assigned the color yellow. And then there was a reference later to a yellow pin being over Alex's apartment in Rexburg. And then there's this ring camera footage of a petite brunette running through the snow to Lori's. And, so there's that question of, was that summer shift light? If so, she was there in late October, after both of the kids were gone. So that would call into question a number of things, including her recorded call with Lori. So there is a good chance that, we're just not going to get answers to some of these things. At the end of the day, the thing that I just have to, keep reminding myself is I am quite confident, even if Lori appeals and is granted an appeal here and in Idaho, I just don't think either of them are ever going to see the outside of a prison or jail cell. Do you think Adam really does not understand how Lori found out about the intervention after it was him who informed the family? Oof, that is a loaded question. I considered even addressing that, and then I was like, like in the presentation, I was like, I have addressed that before, and I wanted to limit the scope, but that is a question that I have, because like he testified that something to the effect of, like, basically Charles wanted him to fly out and record a conversation with Lori. That is not what Charles wanted, and he pushed back on that. Like, this was a very last minute plan. I think Charles, wait a minute, let me double check something. Something I hadn't thought about. So I thought, and someone correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe Ahmad could text me. I'll just open up my text. But I think Charles actually like got Adam's ticket on the 9th. Maybe not. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So on July 9th, Charles texted Adam, your flights are booked. You should have the emails. I'm really uneasy. Now that I'm just reading this from my timeline, just search Annie Cushing timeline. It's going to come up, probably the first result. And you can forward to July 9th. So he said, your flights are booked. You should have the emails. I'm really uneasy about how she will respond, not only to you, but to, no, I won't go into all that. It's not germane. So this was a very last minute plan. I wanted to make sure I wasn't like exaggerating. I really, really want to be fair. So like Charles, he booked the flight on the 9th for the next day. So Adam flew out the next day. Now, Adam had then said something about how like he was going to meet have a family dinner and was going to record it, and Charles had been saying like, I think it's enough for like if you, Brandon, and I just went and met with Holmes. Like that's what Charles wanted. Charles wanted a stealth intervention. He was hoping that the three of them would go and meet with the stake president and bring their concerns and have her temple recommend suspended again. We do know that it was suspended. We don't know how long, but it was suspended after the big blow up in January. So, I don't I don't know when it was actually suspended. I think Charles texted her about it to let her know that it was suspended in early February. But so, perhaps Charles was thinking like, if her temple recommend is suspended, it will cut her off at the knees and, like really cause her to rethink, her life choices. I don't think he was trying to make the relationship work at that point. Just based on some of the text message exchanges he had with some of the women he was chatting with on Google Chat. And I know that Nancy Joe said he spoke very highly of Lori, but he wasn't in those text messages. So I'm not saying like, it still could stand to reason that he would have spoken highly of Lori to Nancy Joe so that he didn't come across, like an angry ex. But anyway, so yeah, so I I think that I think Charles felt like he got Adam this flight, and then Adam just went rogue. Like, okay, so I'm going to have a family dinner. I've got and Adam wasn't asking him like, would you be comfortable with this? Would you mind if I, did this? It was like, I think it was like, I've already reached out to my parents, and, called for this family dinner and stuff. So Adam, like, he took all the self out of it, and so he told his family. And then there was a strange note in his in I think it had to have been in his interview, his August interview with Detective Moffat, where he said his parents were mad at him for doing this intervention. And it was before he confronted them. If one of my mods reminds me, I'll try to find that. I don't want to get like too far down this rabbit hole because tomorrow we're back in trial mode. But yeah, so ostensibly only he, Charles, and maybe Brandon knew that um, that he, although I kind of doubt even with Brandon, because Brandon had Charles blocked on his phone, according to the Gilbert police report, until after Charles was killed. So I don't know how Charles and Brandon would have communicated, but we do know that that Charles had talked to Zach and about the issue of Lori was destroying Brandon and Melanie's marriage. And Zach, according to someone, I forget who who said this, if it was like maybe Zach, I don't know. But when Zach moved out of Charles and Lori's place, he moved in with the Boudreaux. But then I guess when Melanie asked for a divorce and their world kind of turned upside down, that might have been the point where he moved in with his grandparents, Adam's parents. But yeah, so I don't I don't know that Brandon knew about the intervention. He might have. There's just no information about that in the FOIA docs. So yeah, it just seems like, even from Adam's own words, he got the flight and then reached out to his parents and also reached out to Alex, even though he had told Detective Moffat that Alex was totally on board with all of Lori's teachings. So even just reaching out to Alex is, it's like, well, because he reached out to Alex to ask Alex if he could stay with him. But so, there are just a number of details that they're weird. Like, things in my opinion, they don't add up. Like, they just don't make sense. So we don't we don't know um, how the family found out about this intervention. But there was a weird detail in the police report about how Adam and Zach went over to Summer's house. Like, this was on the 10th, when when Adam arrived, and they all played cards, and police asked Summer if she ever expressed concern about this intervention or let Adam know that she knew about the intervention, and she said no. So it was just like one more strange detail in a litany of strange details. Like, Adam goes over to Summer's house and they just play cards. Like, it's just so weird. So, um, I find it hard to believe personally that, especially given Detective Moffat's concern, I find it hard to believe that something didn't spook Adam, or I don't know what it would have been. I do know that he expressed to Charles, he sent a text at one point, like, she's done some like stupid things that like have basically made their family look bad, but like this this is the worst. And so, again, if the family knew that Joe was murdered, there may have been like just kind of an underground current of like, okay, we were all in on that, like, because we just all thought that he was a pedo, and why let the legal system do its job, like um I just think like the whole family just seemed to be comfortable with that kind of thing. There were question marks around Stacy's death, and it's just a very, 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 very strange family. But I do wonder if Adam was worried that, like, now by Lori doing a rinse and repeat, but with Charles, that it could bring the whole family down, because then this this potential murder would be too close to Joe's death. And, who knows what they put in writing? Who knows? Like if police, especially at that time, had started digging, it could have, it just could have been ruinous for their family. And at that point, he was still a DJ. So, Cam said, Annie, did you see with your own eyes, hear with your own ears, or personally witness this Cox family meetup? Well played, well played. Let me see if my mods have dropped in any questions. Oh, yeah, okay, there are questions. All right. Oh, these are good questions. Okay, do you believe Adam wanted to help Charles? Man. On some level, yes. I do. Like I believe that Adam was genuinely concerned. At the same time, Cole Vallow had said early on that, I mean, this was like right after his dad was shot. Oh, and I should explain. Cole and Zach Vallow were Charles' sons from his previous marriage to Cheryl. But so he had sent an email to Detective Moffat early on saying that that Adam had reached out to Kay saying his family had cut him off, but then, they all looked into it and saw like recent pictures of Adam with his family. And also Cheryl had reached out to Kay. There's a reference to that in the FOIA docs saying you shouldn't trust Adam and Nicole. So at that time, like it just kind of seemed like Team Vallow did not trust Adam because of his claims that his family had cut him off, and his and I think they kind of felt like he was running reconnaissance, and then Cheryl had other concerns about Adam and Nicole. So here you have Detective Moffat saying, I don't think you should trust Adam and Nicole. You have Cheryl saying, I don't think you should trust Adam and Nicole. And then we kind of see like a peek behind the curtain from Cole's reference that, the Vallow family themselves didn't trust Adam and Nicole. So, it's really hard. It's really hard to know, especially since I do want to be fair to Adam. Like, it's not a flex. Like, when I watched him testifying, I was just like, God, at the end of the day, it's Lori and it's Chad who destroyed so many families, destroyed lives, even, besides even the ones they murdered, even people who were complicit. I mean, it's like so many people, like their involvement in this group, even people like Serena, Christina, some of these people, like, I just don't think overall they're like terrible people. I think they got caught up. I think that these women were meeting on a daily basis. I think they were probably lonely. It was on some level, I think, exciting to them. And so I do feel empathy toward all of them. But there's something at just these details with Adam, they just don't all line up. I mean, starting with the fact that it's like, great, thanks for the ticket. Now I'm just going to, have these meetups with my family, stay with my brother, who I know believes everything Lori believes, because he told Detective Moffat that like a month later. So why why do that? Why would he have even felt safe to stay there? And and if Zach was staying at Summers, I brought this up before. If Zach was staying at Summers to dog sit, why is Adam staying anywhere but with his son? Like, there was so much chaos at this time. But even if there hadn't been chaos, and there hadn't been cause for Zach to be really fearful, I mean, things were coming to a head. And even if there hadn't been all of this, why weren't you staying with your son? Like, like, you didn't see him at Colby's wedding. Who knows how long it had been since he had seen him. Why leave Zach at Summer's house to dog sit? And he's trying to stay at Alex's, but then, when Alex ghosts him, he stays at his parents'. I mean, there are just so many things that really just do not make sense. What do you think the possibility is for trying Lori for your brother's death? I followed this case the entire time. Lori said she would have Alex kill Joe, right? So according to Lori's friends in Hawaii, Lori had flown out to Hawaii after Joe was found. And one of her friends came forward, and I try to take every opportunity to note, to my knowledge, Anne Eliason was the only person to, like, a friend of Lori's, to come forward, like, of her own volition. And two different people had told her that Lori told them that she paid Alex to kill Joe. One was April Raymond, the other one was Angeline. I think her last name. In several places, it's noted as Law, and then in one source, it's Hall. But I think it's Law, because it was in multiple sources as Angeline Law. But so I don't think Lori was trying to hide this fact, even when she did that weird meetup at Melanie Gibbs' house in whenever that was. Like, this was their introduction to her. I think this was this was October 2018. So this was before Lori met Chad Daybell in person. I do strongly suspect they were communicating online beforehand, but I could be wrong. There's no record of that. So we do know that even in that testimony, like, this was her first time being introduced to the group. Like, she had just met Melanie Gibb like a week or two prior. Then Melanie has her come and share her testimony and records it. And Lori's just out and proud about how, like, she told the bishop, you're either going to give me a temple recommend or I'm going to kill my ex-husband, and and she's sharing all of these details that are really strange to share, especially given the context. But in that testimony, she was even talking about, like, kids dying. She was like, even if your children or your family members, all go to the other side, it's because they chose to go to the other side, and your kids are like adults in heaven, and it's just like all these strange things. So she had no chill. She had no internal editor. So yeah, I just think that she was pretty, wasn't hiding the fact that she played a hand in Joe's death and actually paid her brother. And if she did, they would have that financial record, they wouldn't be able to prove what it was for. She may have paid him in cash, but yeah. Yeah, but do I think that they're going to investigate his death? If so, not anytime soon. I think the only chance of Phoenix police investigating Joe's death is if, like, at some point someone joins, like, the cold case, department or team, and is like, just has a fire in his or her belly that's like, you know what, I want to take on this case. But and I have seen, just from having followed true crime as long as I have seen instances where that's happened. And I forget the one guy's name, but like he shot and killed a police officer and held up I think it was like a car with four teens, and it had been like in the 50s, I think, like the 50s or 60s. And a cold case detective decided not that long ago that they were going to pick up this cold case, and they found the guy, and it was like it was circumstantial evidence. It was, I think, something with his signature in a hotel or something like that. Uh, but he was like a grandfather at that point and he had had a completely clean record since then. I think he might have been even like in his 70s. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, feel free to, share it. But like cases like that give me a modicum of hope that one day, when all this dust settles, there might be someone who, but I think that there would have to be like new leadership, because I think at this point, Maricopa County is like, I mean, it is clear they didn't even want to pursue charges in Charles' death. Like, their hand was forced. And now they also have to do Brandon's Brandon's trial in the attempted murder of him. And that's just going to surface additional issues, like the fact that they only interviewed Melanie Pulowski one time with her toddler there, and it was a very, very soft pedal interview. But anyway, so I think Maricopa County I suspect they can't wait to get all of this off their plate. Have you heard the interview with Alex's first wife? She mentioned Joe. Yeah, I did. I so appreciate that she came forward like that. Not that that matters, but no one was. It just seemed like she came forward because she was like, wait, I've seen this pattern before. And so for those of you who don't know, Alex was married for a very brief period of time. And one of the reasons she cited in divorcing him was the strange kind of quasi-sexual relationship he had with Lori, like imitating, intimate acts and, things like that. But she said that Alex had this plan to, like, he was trying to provoke, if I remember correctly, he was trying to provoke Joe into a fight so that he could shoot him and it would be justifiable homicide. So when she saw that he had shot Charles, she came forward saying, this isn't new. Okay. Oh, why didn't Lori bring up Melanie Pulowski's story of Adam stealing from family members and looking at porn? That was, and she clarified. And hi, this Idaho mom reports when MP told GPD. So when Melanie Pulaski told Gilbert police, I don't remember her saying that Adam was stealing from the family. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it is very strange to me that not only with Adam, but also with the other witnesses, she hasn't pulled in any evidence, and that's kind of what makes me think that she may she may be playing a game of chicken with the state, like they're treating the reader file that they were given, which is a more limited. Um, I've already talked about this at length, but it's just basically a much more limited view of the evidence from Charles' phone than if they handed over the Cellbrite, I forget what it's called. It's like USBD or something like that. The non-reader version that requires the paid version of Cellbrite. So it almost seems like they're treating all of the data. Sorry, I dropped my glasses. Uh, it almost seems like they're treating all of the information as like fruit from a cursed tree, like she's just not presenting any of it. At least in week one, she hasn't. And that's very strange to me, um, because she certainly could have, um, impeached some of these witnesses. So, I do wonder if they're just not using any of the evidence to try to make the point of we didn't feel comfortable using the information from the data or the reader file because it was incomplete. And and this just could be like at this point, they could feel pretty confident that they have grounds for appeal. And this might, at this point, like they might just be treating this as a dry run, like why pin down these witnesses with partial data when they can find out, like the state's entire hand, and then address these things, at the next trial. So I don't know. I mean, everything is strange. Why does Adam say he played basketball, but on the police call, uh, state that he didn't? I have the same question, and I just ran out of time with some of the other distractions from the day. I just ran out of time. I was actually going to pull that up. I will at some point pull up the reference in his interview with Detective Moffat in 2019 and compare it with his testimony last week. But that is my memory as well. But I don't want to go on memory. So, okay. Someone said off this topic. That's fine. That's fine. But I was confused about the online dating site. Who was using whose picture? Yeah, I don't know. That was an LDS dating app. So I didn't really follow that, and I haven't circled back. Like some of these things after the trial is over, I'll just kind of pick through like some of my questions. But I think, and I could be wrong. Excuse me. But I think Nancy Joe was saying that, at least my impression was that uh, was that she recognized Adam's picture, but he was using a different name. So that makes me wonder if he was using his radio personality name, like the Lucas, that name. He may have, just because he didn't want people to recognize his name and be spooked, or potentially go on a date with him, uh, just to find out, like, about the case. So, excuse me, that was my impression, that he used a different name, but his real picture. And Nancy Joe was saying, you might, because now your face is recognizable, you might want to use your real name. But I don't know. Annie, do you think evidence will eventually come in that'll explain why Adam would be worried about Alex being at Lori's as Charles was arriving? No. Uh-uh. I don't. And this is part of the reason that um, I I think Trina has a really difficult job, because she has to protect the witnesses, and so some of these things, it's, I mean, I think she's doing a good job, but I think she was handed um, just a terrible hand. But uh, but it was interesting. So when I look back at Charles and Adam's final exchange, Charles said, Alice here. Adam said, at Lori's. So Charles said, Alice here. Adam said, at Lori's. Adam said, really, dot, dot. I wonder why he never called me back. So, like right from the get go, it's just like, like Charles had to be really kind of freaking out, because I think he knew what happened with Joe, and because he had said in his interview with Gilbert Police in January 2019, he said that Lori told him, "I'm going to kill you too." And so ostensibly no one else had been killed. So who was the two that Charles was referencing? I mean, it's just one more strange detail in like a stack of strange details with this case. But and then Lori called him Joe Ryan less than 2 weeks before he was murdered. So I think he was very nervous. He reaches out to Adam, and Adam's like, I wonder why he never called me back, which it does seem to be a little on brand for Adam to be kind of focused. But, he might be just kind of thinking out loud, like, maybe this is tied. I don't know. But then Adam said they are planning something. Charles said, absolutely. Then this exchange, in my opinion, and people may disagree, that's great, but this exchange, to me, communicated irritation toward Adam. So Adam said, I was supposed to spend the night at his house last night, dot dot dot. She probably blocked that. And then Charles just said, what you do is up to you. Like, it just seemed like at that point Charles was like, I'm done. Like, I'm trying to like let you know I'm worried. Alex is at Lori's house. We don't know what either of them knew about Alex, except they did both know that uh, Alex tased Joe and tried to kill him. We also know that Adam and Colby were aware of the plan. They both referenced the plan was for Alex to tase Joe, then put him in the trunk, take him out to the desert, shoot him, and bury him. And that was, I believe, a week after the last minute family vacation that she invited us to join her on in uh, I I believe that vacation was the end of July, and then I think Alex teased Joe on it was like the first week in August, maybe like August 5th, something like that. And but and Lori had said even before that, so after they would have gotten back from the vacation, but before Joe, I mean, pretty soon before Joe was tased, that um, that death would be an option before allowing Tylee to have visitation restored with her dad. So she didn't clarify whose death was she talking about, killing Tylee or killing Joe. But there was some like legal scrambling after that, and Vivian was very concerned for Tylee's safety, given that comment that Lori had made, as well as others. But that whole thing of what you do is up to you is, I'm not trying to attach undue weight to it, but it just seemed a little ominous. Okay, let me see. Any other questions? Has a date been set for Brandon's trial? I don't think so. Marissa said, I'm honestly confused by what you said about Alex and the family gathering. I'm not sure if you're referring to the one on July 9th or the family gathering in at the Queen Creek house. So maybe mods, if this person clarifies, maybe we could add that question back in, and I'll look at that. Carolina asked, are you going to Lori's trial every day? I'm asking because has Lori seen you there? I think she meant, has Lori seen you there? Yes, she has. If so, how has she reacted towards you? So there was only one brief look that I caught. Now, also keep in mind, my head has been down in my laptop most of the trial, but because when I'm not taking notes, I've been working on this app. But so we had like one very brief, eye connection, and she just gave me like just a very quick, like somewhat like crooked smile. It wasn't a smile. It was just kind of like almost like an acknowledgement that, like, okay, I see you. And I didn't react, and then Thursday, she looked at me on her way out. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised she looks around at all. I wouldn't. I would just look down, in both directions. But it's been inconsequential. Her reaction was much more pronounced at Lori's trial, because I think the main factor was my one daughter was with me, and Lori hadn't seen her since 2007, and I think she was just stunned to see her, especially. I mean, she did look at me, but she seemed to be much more focused on my daughter, and embarrassed. But yeah. The one thing that I thought of this, I think a couple questions ago, when I was talking about, I do wonder if this, like, if Lori is kind of treating this as a dry run. There's just this question in the back of my mind. Like, I was very surprised to hear that Nate said that the trial may wrap up next week. So I I wasn't even going to be able to stay the full 6 weeks. So I was thinking I would probably miss, like the verdict. But I wanted to be here for as much as I could. Uh, but then hearing that the state is wrapping up next week, I mean, I'm in the conjecture lane, but that's quite a significant differential. Now, of course, it might be that Lori won't have any witnesses, and maybe they were anticipating that she might. But even then, eh, I don't know. I just wonder if the state also suspects that she might be like kind of saving her best defense for the next trial. And I do wonder if like maybe they decided like, okay, we're gonna cut this trial short. I really don't know, but if they really do wrap up this week, I mean, we're talking about going from 6 weeks to 2 weeks, but um, who knows? uh, Someone asked, then does it seem Adam has a guilty conscience after Charles was, and then dot dot dot. I think it would be hard not to have a guilty conscience. I think everyone who, not even just for what he may have or may not have or may have failed to do that, left Charles unprotected. Even, just the fact that, he and his wife came in like gangbusters, uh, assailing Tylee's character and adding to this impression that Kay had already started, which was that Tylee was one of them. It looked like Kay had said to Detective Moffat only like part of her sentence is redacted, but it looks like she said that Tylee made an outcry against Joe, but then just recently had admitted to Charles and Lori that it wasn't true. We don't know like the part that I'm filling in the part about like Tylee accusing Joe of something. Well, the part we know was that, but she had like just recently admitted to Lori and Charles that it wasn't true. So we don't know what that was, but I suspect she told Detective Moffat that Tylee just made up the allegations against Joe. And now we know from those FOIA docs, she never made an outcry against Joe. And it was actually Charles and Colby who were pressuring her to make an outcry. And we know that because she told the therapist that. The therapist asked if anyone was pressuring her to make an outcry. So, so you have these family members like kind of like focused on Tylee, and then Adam comes in and is like, you can break Tylee. Tylee is, quote, thicker than thieves with Lori and Alex. Nicole actually agreed with Tylee's dark rating, said she was a, quote, terrible kid, referenced something that she did that she claims Tylee did when she was 7 years old. I mean, we're talking like there had been almost 10 years transpired, if I remember correctly. It might have actually been 6. But it's like, why would you bring that up? Like, why are they coming in just like Tylee's one of them? You can break her, and so I imagine they have experienced, significant guilt about that, because they obviously all knew that she had been rated a very dark spirit. And it only takes logic 101 to deduce, well, if Tylee is the darkest spirit of anyone who was alive from that list, that suggests that she wasn't actually one of them. um, because people who are one of them, they weren't rated dark spirits, and they were given like high trust ratings, like Melanie Gibb and Zulema, and so it just, mm, I imagine a lot of these family members feel a lot of guilt, and I take no pleasure in that. I can't imagine, just what they carry. Suzanne asked, what made Detective Moffat suspicious of Adam? One, he said that um, Adam had been telling uh, Kay that he called, that Adam had called Detective Moffat, had left messages, and according to Kay, Detective Moffat just wasn't returning his calls. And so Kay's kind of running interference, like, like she really appears to be anxious, like she wants the two of them to talk. And so he was suspicious of Adam for that, because he's like, I don't have any messages. I haven't heard from Adam at all. And I think that bears out, because when Nicole emailed Detective Moffat, first of all, it was strange that like Nicole would be the one to reach out, but she doesn't reference like, having left him messages or anything. Like, she's introducing herself for the first time. And then also when Detective Moffat and Adam talked, like Adam never said like, hey, what's going on? Like, I left 3 messages for you. We don't actually have a number of what that he actually told Kay. We just know it was, his claim was that he had left multiple messages. So I think that was already just causing Detective Moffat concern, just like something is up with this guy, and he was concerned for Kay, trusting him. Detective Moffat would have also received that email from Cole, which kind of put Adam in a suspicious light, because of Adam saying his family had cut him off. Then they look at his social media, and there were pictures with Adam and his family, and then the concern about, which we may never get more insight into, but his concern that Adam may have called Lori after talking to Charles. Again, I've said this so many times. I don't think when he said Adam may have called Lori, I don't think that was him not being sure, because why would he have tried to call Kay 3 times and then, like pass the message on to Bobby in hopes that Bobby would tell Kay? Clearly, something he saw made him very concerned about Adam's untrustworthiness. So I think those were the factors. Does it matter if Adam told his family? Who would have thought it would lead to Red Rum? Yeah, I think it matters a lot, because it did lead to murder. And according to Charles, like Lori first threatened to murder him in January. So it's not like, oh, who could have anticipated this? I mean, like Alex was, he tried to murder Joe. Then there, are these claims that Lori was bragging that she paid Alex to murder Joe. So I just don't think that the family would have been like, I mean, sure, one husband, one attempted murder, one possible murder. But I think, he's probably gotten it out of his system. By Adam's own words, Alex was tangled up with Lori and believed everything that Lori said. So yeah, I think that they were they were very worried. And yeah, so I think for him to then tell his family why he was there, I mean, obviously it had tragic consequences, in my opinion, because maybe if he wouldn't have, the family wouldn't have had a heads up, and they wouldn't have been able to like circle the wagons, and and Alex may not have had reason to stay at Lori's. Like they could have actually done this by stealth, and Adam, excuse me, could have actually gone back to Kansas without anyone from the family even knowing he had been there. So yeah, I think he had a responsibility to be very careful, and at minimum ask Charles instead of just telling him. Like by the time by the time Adam told Charles, oh, he had already reached out to his family, and he had already reached out to Alex. So what was Charles going to do at that point? Then then Adam had said, oh, he's going to record. So then Charles helped him with like, well, if you're going to record, maybe have a separate device that you record with that's hidden, and you put your phone out on the table. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's a really significant detail. Who did Lori tell she had to go back to Charles in Houston to manage his money? That was Melanie Gibb. I think she said something about needing to put his finances in order. Has it already been asked why Adam contacted Alex for a place to stay if this was supposed to be a big secret? Yeah, I did address that. So no, and it makes no sense. Didn't the police report say that Summer told Lori about the intervention? Oh, well, yeah, Summer and their mom, Janice, were like running reconnaissance, and Summer was like, do you want us to do more and stuff? What's not clear is who told Summer. Like, it's not obviously this was supposed to be a stealth mission, but also we know that Adam told his family, and I want to look up. I remember like somewhere he had said that his that like his family was actually angry at him about doing this intervention. So it might, yeah, but it sounded like that was like from the family meeting, but I don't know. I'll look that up. Okay. How could police not find any evidence on Joe, his phone, laptop, etc.? It seems, and they take a lot of crap at face value when it comes to Lori. She's not that beautiful. It's infuriating. So I think with Joe, according to the police report, which was a very, very short report, they had decided that if the ME's report came back natural causes, that they wouldn't investigate. And then the ME's report came back natural causes, but there's this caveat of there's a detail in the ME's report that said he didn't perform an internal examination. So he based the cause of death on an external examination and a review of his medical records. I've said this multiple times. Oh, I should ask ChatGPT and Claude this question. Could one of my mods remind me? That would be a good question to throw out to AI. But according to a medical examiner who was on a podcast with me, it was a Nancy Grace podcast. We were all talking before the podcast started. Nate Eaton was also on this podcast. He had asked, I think the medical examiner had said, well, but Joe's cause of death was, decided as natural, right? And I said, well, yeah, but they didn't open him up. And so he was like, wait a minute, what do you mean they didn't open him up? I said, it was based on an external examination and a review of his medical record. And I'm not even sure it included, I'm not even sure they got his medical records. It might have just been the prescriptions that they noted in his apartment. I should probably look that up too, because I don't want to misreport. But yeah, so he had said if the ME didn't do an internal examination, if they didn't open Joe up and actually, review whatever that part of the physical examination, then the ME shouldn't have ruled it natural causes. He said that it should have been ruled undetermined. I can't confirm that, except I am definitely going to use AI to ask about that. But yeah, so but because the ME ruled it natural causes, they just destroyed everything in the apartment. But there is still a potential circumstantial case, based on, circumstantial evidence. Like, it looks like Joe had just moved in to that apartment. So, so there could be digital evidence that he was actually, lured back to Phoenix, and it appears he was packing for a trip with Tylee, because he had a girl's backpack and a girl's iPad cover, and so there are a number of things that they could still use, depending on how long the digital records were kept. That's a really big question, because some data providers, cell phone providers, keep the evidence much longer than others. What is your impression of Lori's mom and dad? I haven't seen the dad, Barry, on any media. He made a very brief appearance. I forget which one it was, but he talked about how when Lori was younger, she asked him some question about their faith, and I think she declared, Dad's a spiritual giant. And he also made a comment about like basically Lori being a captive of Satan. But I don't remember if that was, I think it was a Netflix documentary, but I'm not sure. It would have either been that or Adam and Evil. I've talked about them quite a bit. I have met Janice and Barry. They were kind to me. They were kind to my family. There were definitely red flags. I talked about how Lori, Janice, Barry, my daughter, and I were having a conversation, and Barry had cautioned my daughter not to marry someone who was unattractive, even if he was successful. And he told a story about how one of Lori's friends married someone who made a lot of money but wasn't attractive, and all their kids looked like the husband, and added those kids should have been drowned at birth. So very, very, very disturbing. They didn't come around very much. Like I think one time per visit. But yeah, there were red flags. And then in the um, and that wasn't something that we took lightly. Like I talked with my daughter about it afterwards 'cause she had never heard someone say something like that. But then uh, someone who had been involved in the investigation into Colby's outcry against Joe had passed on their notes to me from that investigation. So this dates back to 2006 to 2008 maybe, and these notes were extensive, but there were very serious allegations about Barry in those notes, and I think Megan Connor has also addressed some of those things, but uh, yeah, so yeah, just very serious allegations. But then also, after the kids' remains were found, Summer posted like kind of a mea culpa and a tribute to Tylee and JJ. And she posted like a lot of really sweet pictures. But then there was one picture where, in my opinion, Barry is very obviously groping Tylee. And he just has like this weird lecherous look on his face. And so, even in that regard, I was just like, what is wrong with this family? Is this like passive aggressive? Is this, like, we already know that the video that Summer made for the tribute to Alex after he died didn't include pictures of Tylee and JJ, and so I don't know. There are just all these question marks, like, that seem to support the family. Just you know I don't know, there is something very weird in this family toward Tylee, because if I had seen a picture like that, like, first of all, I would have called Child Protection Services. But even if I suspend reality for a moment and say I'm a Cox family member, there are too many skeletons. Well, I can't afford to, like, it, enlist an investigation into the family. Even if I do all of those things, which makes me want to throw up, but even if I did that, like, you have so many pictures of Tylee. Why post something like that? And then she also included a picture of, her and Tylee at a gun range, and then Janice, my friend Janice Summers, she actually, this is how, like, just how eagle-eyed she is. She saw that in the reflection on one of their sunglasses, I think maybe Summers, I don't know, one of their glasses, a reflection of a white truck, which, then she questioned, like, is Alex there? But anyway, so, like, even in that regard, it just seemed like she was just kind of like doing Lori a solid, like, I'm just saying that Tylee did know how to use a gun, but at the absolute minimum, I mean, the picture of Barry groping Tylee, I mean, you can look that up. It's, last I checked, it's still alive in her tribute. It's with the rest of those pictures. If it's not there, leave a comment. I will post the picture. But that was absolutely reprehensible. There is no excuse for it. You can see Tylee looks uncomfortable. It looks like she's trying to pull away, but with the picture of Tylee with Summer at the gun range, at the absolute minimum, is tone deaf. Like, her remains were just found. So, and in, you know, there weren't much of her remains left. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. Have you seen Adam and Colby appear to be going after Megan, the cousin? Uh, I I haven't followed anyone's channels, so but I've heard about it. I've heard that both Adam and Colby are like kind of focused on Megan. To me, it just kind of comes across like, pay no attention to that cousin behind the curtain, which, again, it just, this tracks. This is, in my opinion, a solid Cox family tradition, and whoever shares any details that potentially make them look bad or complicit, or like they weren't this perfect family until Chad came along, then they're just liars. They're just causing drama. They're just, I don't know. I heard that there was like some reference to like, where were you at Christmas or something, like, what does that have to do with anything, but so I just think that it's the Cox way, like I think the Cox family really wants people to believe they were this cohesive family unit. Had some oddities, Janice laughed about how, none of them went to any of Lori's weddings, and, this and that. And, but we're like a happy, normal family. And then Chad Daybell comes along, and, their daughter is so impressionable and so easy to lead. He just, led Lori away. But, Janice herself said when questioned in May 2020 if Chad could have like it basically led Lori down the primrose path, she was emphatic. She was like, no, it's impossible. No. And yeah, and I've already done a live where after seeing some of Lori's text messages that weren't in the FOIA docs, but they were included in these trials that I wasn't able to follow closely and much at all. Now that I have this app, I'm finding things, and then I'll do, keyword searches, because I'm looking for one thing, but then I'm like, okay, well, now I have to search for this because that's weird. That's a new piece of information. And I just kept pulling at that string until, I unearthed that like Lori was actually pressuring Chad to reduce the death ratings for both JJ and Tammy. And even when he rated them very low, so they were very close to death, they were 2 and 3, Lori was like, why not 0? Yeah, so she's like, and that wasn't in the FOIA docs. But so in my opinion, she was absolutely conducting the orchestra. Yeah, he was willing to be led, but she was the leader, in my opinion. Okay. Almost off topic, but what do you think they used to cause organ failure or blood clots to mimic a natural death? As for Alex, maybe Joe. Well, also Eldon Clausen, Chad's neighbor. I will never not believe that they weren't using malachite. And we'll never know because they didn't test. And even, I believe it was the ME who did Tammy's autopsy had said they don't just have like a one test for like that can detect the presence of poisoning. Like that ME said they have to know what to test for. But when I saw that, I was just like, seriously, like no one said, oh, I don't know. How about malachite? Since this group was so freaking obsessed with malachite, and Lori had two failed attempts at buying malachite wedding rings before actually buying their cheap costume jewelry wedding rings. Like the most important thing to her is that it had malachite. And then I found out, using this app and searching for malachite, that Chad was, according to one of the witnesses in his trial, he was the first one to search for malachite. So but also he was friends with Audrey, who was an herbologist, I think, and they were talking regularly. So there's just a question in my mind. Was Audrey the one who introduced malachite to this group? And is that what earned her a perfect 100 trust score? We don't know. We don't know. And like I said, I suspect all these details will be redacted. Sharon asked, why is Zach ping-ponging between all the Coxes? Where was his mom for all this? They were in Kansas. I don't know. Maybe he just really didn't want to live in Kansas. But yeah, I don't know. I've kind of assumed he was able to live at these different places rent free, so that might have enabled him to save up some money to where he could move out on his own. Also, we know that Zach went back with Adam when they flew back to Kansas. So we don't know how long, like Zach may have stayed there before moving back to Arizona. I just don't know. Do you happen to know why Kay Woodcock didn't testify about being Lori saying, I think she meant about Lori saying Charles died from a heart attack? I think that was the question. Would that have been hearsay? It was actually Colby who said that. No, I that would have been a really egregious thing to, like, for Lori to say Charles died of a heart attack, and then he gets there and it's just kind of chaos. Tylee's crying, Alex is patting his boo-boo, and but we know from Detective Kunsitis from Rexburg Police that the last time Lori flew under the name Valo was a flight she had bought a day or two after Charles was killed. So I assume that was the Houston trip, because all of the other flights are accounted for. And she was using the name Ryan. She was using her Hawaii driver's license. It would also kind of make sense that he would be vague on what that flight was for, because understandably they want to protect Colby. He was a witness for the state. So, it just, it's question marks in my mind. Like, if Lori had told him that, no, personally, I find that claim suspicious, because he had said, if I had known he was shot, I wouldn't have gone over to the house. And I think that was just kind of him explaining away the pool party, because he's never said he wasn't at the pool party. He's just said, if I had known that Charles was shot, I wouldn't have gone over to the house. But so yeah, I just personally, I find that claim dubious, because it just wouldn't make sense that he would then be down with, just a few days after Charles was murdered. I think it was like 3 days. I think they flew out to Houston on the 14th and worked through the night. So they returned on the 15th. He said that they worked through the night. And so, like, why would you have done that? So I don't know. Where was Tylee living during the 58 days Lori was gone from Charles and JJ? Didn't Tylee wonder how JJ was doing? Yeah. We know that Tylee went with Lori to Hawaii the first time she went out there. We don't have exact dates on when they flew out and when they returned, but in a Facebook group, I had asked April Raymond, and she had said that she remembered they were there for Valentine's. And so we don't know when they flew out, but they would have come back on Valentine's. And that also tracks with the rest of the timeline, where I think Lori and Melanie Gibb flew to Boise together for the Preparing a People conference. So, and I think that was the 14th. So, but then after that, Tylee stayed at Alex's, and Janice and I, we retraced we retraced Lori's steps the day that Charles was killed, and we did go by Alex's house. Some of these addresses I was able to get just because, there would be one detail left in, like that was redacted in one version of a report, but a lot of these individual reports were in triplicate. So there was overlap between like the FBI, Chandler Police, and Gilbert Police. And so I was able to track down all of the addresses. And so we went to Alex's, and it was a very, very small house. I mean, very small. So much so there was a garage in the front. And if someone reminds me, I know I say this a lot, I'll throw a picture out and just redact the street number if that's in the picture. But it was so small that the garage took up the entire front of the house, and you actually entered the house instead of like a front door. You the entry was along the side of the house, so it was almost like what you would expect from like a trailer in a trailer park. My dad lived in a trailer park, and and there would be like the front of the trailer, but then you had to walk around to the side to get in, and that's just how small the house was. And yeah, sorry, well, like knowing the house that they had lived in Queen Creek, being so big, and they always had these like big houses, and even the murder house, it was a good size. Like, I think we were both surprised by how big it was. But this house was just so small, so they would have been in such close quarters. And because Tylee had been rated a dark spirit in August 2018, and it sure appears that Alex believed, all of this stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure, and Tylee would have known that, she wasn't safe. Sorry, but I forget. I forget why I was even going there. No, I forget what the question was. Oh yeah, so she was she was living with Alex, and then at one point she moved to Houston with Lori for that brief period of time that Lori and Charles were reconciled, and yeah, and then they moved to Chandler. Okay, I am going to call it a night there, and we will we'll be back at it again tomorrow. Good night.